It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Iran's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and today we'll be looking at Iran's squad for the 2022 World Cup. Also, this preamble is going to be the same for every mediacast we do for players. So those familiar with it can jump ahead a little more than 3 minutes to where we begin talking about the team. There will be a timestamp for YouTube watchers. And so you can just go and click directly to that point. For those looking for a quick version of this, you can skip to near the end of the mediacast. In the last I'd say 8 minutes or so, where we summarize the likely starters. And just prior to that, with about 15 minutes remaining, we'll have some discussion on the squad, the main issues with the squad, how we see their overall strength and what they look like going into the cup, as well as the players and issues to look out for. So we'll put those times in the show notes, and there'll also be timestamps for YouTube watchers. And we'll also be editing this mediacast into a shorter version for those who are looking for more of an overview. For those looking for a deeper dive, we go through the players and explain why we rank them the way we do, and give some information on their soccer history and their standing with the squad. And the way we do this is first by organizing the players into their designated positions. So it should be noted, actually, that these positions are a bit artificial, since players don't always play in their coded positions, but I'll try to point that out as we go. Nevertheless, their coded positions is a good way to organize the discussion. Then we go through the players and share some of the data we've collected in our files. And using that data, we try to predict how likely the player is to make the team, based mostly on their recent participations. So we categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, or seems to be off the squad. And we also mention any big players who have recently retired, and we make note of any players who are currently injured. We'll also try to determine at the end which players will be starters and which will be substitutes. Okay, for those following on YouTube, we'll have a very simple graphic where we list the names. You can actually see how the names are spelled. I may be mispronouncing a few names in this podcast. And it's the same broadcast. Sorry, I'm trying to separate video cast and podcast. It's the same broadcast for the audio podcast. So we're going to try to repeat the names a few times to help listeners familiarize themselves with the players' names. So when they're on the field, you have some kind of familiarity with them. And that's as much as we can do at this point. But as the rosters are being published, we'll do an update episode. That will be essentially going over our predictions, updating them based on the games played to that point, actually between now, which is the beginning of September, and the beginning of the World Cup in November. And at that point, we'll also be able to reveal which players were selected, maybe even for the preliminary squad and for the final squad. So keep your eye out for those update podcasts. There'll be an update on the team and on the players, and that'll probably be in mid-November. All right, let's move on. We did a podcast for Iran. I think it was 2 games into the final round of World Cup qualifying for this tournament. So it was mostly based on teams. And as far as players went, we really just mentioned their main players. But we do have a couple of takeaways from that podcast. And most of them are kind of at the team level there. So we posited, we talked about whether Asia is kind of catching up with the rest of the world. Generally, I'd say before 2002, they were very unlikely to pass the group stage and pretty much did well to get there. But in the last 20 years or so, Asian teams have been passing the group stage a bit more often. Not Iran, though. I am told by an Iranian friend who's pretty knowledgeable about the team that in 2006, that was kind of their most hopeful year. However, they suffered a lot of injuries to key players just as the tournament came around. So they were kind of disappointed that they weren't able to put their best foot forward for that cup. In 2018, they really almost made it past the first round with Spain, Portugal, and Morocco in their group, but fell short. But the truth is that the Asian teams are kind of catching up and are more of a threat to pass the group stage. So Iranian fans are quite hopeful this time that they'll be able to get through the group stage for the first time. The second issue, or the second takeaway that we talked about, was we discussed whether Iran has a regional advantage here, with the cup fairly close to their, to their home. Climate-wise, it'll probably be similar. They've played a lot in Qatar because they're in the region, so a lot of their qualifying games will be in that area. And going through the players, I see a lot of their players actually have been with teams in Qatar. I don't know if they did that specifically in preparation for this cup, or I imagine the Qatari teams pay more than they're able to get in Iraq. But, they do seem to have kind of targeted Qatar and have some players either playing or have played with those teams. And maybe it was with an eye to gaining a bit of an advantage or familiarity with what they'll be facing in this World Cup. And then the last takeaway from the previous podcast. Actually, I don't think they had done it by this point, but I will bring it up here because I think it's good to mention at the beginning. They've recently undergone a change of manager. Which is interesting, and we will talk about it actually when we move on to managers right away, pretty quickly here. Okay, so those are some of the issues that we'll return to a bit later in the podcast, and let's move on to talk about their formations. We'll take a look what they lined up like in the Asian Cup. That was quite a while ago, but it may be of interest because that was under manager Carlos Queiroz. So he was replaced after that, but now is back for this cup. And it may be kind of similar to this. Basically, a similar formation every time, except for the midfield. So the midfield changed, but it was always 4 defenders at the back and 1 attacker up front. And then sometimes the midfield changed from a 1-4 formation to a 4-1 formation to a 2-3 formation, or just straight 5 across the back. So always 4 defenders and always 1 forward there. That remained mostly the same in their first round of World Cup qualifying, except they did go with a 2-man forward line a few times, 3 times. And once they even had a 3-man forward line, but always a 4-man defense all through round 1 of World Cup qualifying. And same with round 2 of World Cup qualifying, always a 4-man defense. And then some variation in the front lines. 3 times they went with 2 forwards, and again, 1 time went with a 4-3-3, so 3 forwards. Otherwise, it's kind of some combination of 5 midfielders, either a 2-3 or a 1-4, like that. So that is what their formation looks like. So we will look for kind of 2 central defenders, 2 outside defenders, and usually 1 forward. but sometimes 2 forwards. Okay, let's move on to talk about the squad. And we're going to begin with the manager situation. So the current manager, and the manager who presumably will be taking them through the cup, is Carlos Queiroz. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, whether it's Queiroz or Queiroz. Nevertheless, he was their manager during the 2019 Asian Cup, the last one. And he parted with them after that, and actually has coached 2 teams in between. He managed Colombia in the 2019 Copa America and Egypt in the 2021 African Cup, where he behaved disgracefully, I might add. And now he's back with the team for this, with the Iranian team for this cup. The managers who were there during this cup, there were 2 of them, and so let's take a look at the manager situation. All right, so let's look at the managers. The current manager is Carlos Queiroz. So Carlos Queiroz was their manager for the 2019 Asian Cup. That was the last regional cup in Asia. Most other regions had a cup in 2021. And he left the team after that and actually went on to coach a couple of other teams. He managed Colombia in the 2019 Copa America, and he managed Egypt in the 2021 African Cup. And I might say he behaved disgracefully there too. And came back, though, to Iran for this cup, and that was in September of this year, so just recently. Meanwhile, after he left, Belgian manager Mark Wilmots, and after him, Croatian manager Dragan Skokic managed the teams, but obviously didn't do well. Actually, what happened was the president of Iran's Football Federation was voted back in. He had been the previous president, was voted out and voted back in, and he had always favored Carlos Queiroz. So once he was reinstated, he in turn reinstated Carlos Queiroz. So Carlos Queiroz is a real international manager. I mentioned a couple of teams he's managed since 2019 when he left, but he was manager of Iran for the 2014 World Cup and the 2015 Asian Cup. And before that, he managed Portugal in the 2010 World Cup and South Africa in the 2002 African Cup. And he managed them through qualification for the World Cup in 2002, but left the team shortly before they played in that cup. So he has certainly been around. He's also managed club teams in Japan and United States, and was manager of Real Madrid in Spain in 2003 and 2004, and was also an assistant manager in a couple of spells for Manchester United. So a very experienced manager, despite his behavior in the 2021 African Cup. Okay, so he will be there, and we'll move on to goalkeepers. And we have, as the candidates, we have Ali Reza Behrenband as a definite candidate, and we have Amin Abedzadeh as the also a definite candidate, and we have Hossein Hosseini as a possible candidate, and Payam Niazmand also as a possible candidate, and finally we have Mohammed Reza Akbari as a possible but unlikely candidate. So let's take a look at these players in more detail, beginning with Ali Reza Berenvand. So we have him as a definite because he started 10 of their 16 games since 2021 and was on the bench for 4 others, just 2 matches that he wasn't selected for. And he plays for one of the big teams in Iran, Persepolis, but he has been abroad. Sorry, I should start with his national team information. So he's been with the national team since 2015, and he has 50 caps and no goals, of course, because goalies usually don't score, and he's 30 years old. So as I started to say, he plays for Persepolis in Iran, and his international clubs were Royal Antwerp in Belgium. That was fairly recent, from 2020 to 22, and he was loaned to Boa Vista in Portugal as well. And he was not on the team for the 2014 World Cup, but was the substitute keeper for the 2015 Asian Cup. And he got the starting position from the World Cup 2018 and was the starter in 2019. I remember him for his long throws. He's capable of very long throw-outs, which impressed me. Okay, the other definite candidate is Amir Abedzadeh, and he started the other 6 of their 16 games since 2021, and he was on the bench for 9. So the only match he wasn't selected for was the one directly after the Asian Cup. And he's been with the team since 2018 and has 10 caps and is 29 years old. And he plays in Spain for a smaller team in Spain, Ponferradina. I'm not really familiar with that team, I confess, but he was with a bigger team before that, Maritimo and Barreirense in Portugal. That was from 2016. He was in Portugal. He also played in the USA for a little while and was with Tottenham Youth Club, but he played for Iranian teams during that time, including Persepolis there too. So Amir Abedzadeh, a definite candidate. We don't have any kind of likely candidates, but we have a couple of possible candidates. So I suppose it'll be one of these two. Hossein Hosseini, he actually returned after a 2.5-year absence in March of this year, 2022. He didn't start any games. There were only 3 games left at that point, but he was on the bench for all 3 of them. And since 2018, he has 4 caps and is 30 years old. And he plays for the other big team in Iran, Estaglal. And and is a possible candidate here. The other possible candidate is Payam Niazmand, and he got his first cap in October 2020, and he hasn't started any games, but since 2021, he's been on the bench for 12 of their 16 games. So only 4 games that he wasn't selected for. So I would have him as the likely candidate, except of those 4 games he wasn't selected for, 3 of them were the last 3 matches. So I wonder if he is on the way out and being replaced by Hosseini. We'll have to see with the upcoming games between now and the World Cup. So he only has 1 cap since his first appearance in 2019, and he's 27 years old, and he plays for Portimonense in Portugal, but he's been with Sepahan, which is also, I'm not sure which are the biggest teams in Iran, but these are usually the teams I mentioned will be bigger teams. Sepahan I know to be a fairly big team. Okay, so Payam Niazmand, a possible candidate. And finally, we have Mohammed Reza Akbari, and he returned after a 4-year absence in June 2021, and was on the bench for 2 matches. But I think that was kind of early in the after the Asian Cup, or sorry, after 2021, and hasn't been on the bench recently, is my point. So we only have him as a possible but unlikely candidate, and we'll give more details on him if he seems to come more into the picture. All right, so the situation with goalies, in summary, is Beran Band played through the Asian Cup and all of the round 1 games that we talked about, except against Cambodia, where Abed Zadeh started. But in round 2, he started the first 5 games, but then Abed Zadeh took over for 4 games, and Beran Band returned right at the end for the last game. So that casts a bit of doubt on who the starter is. But I would guess Beran Band will be the starter, with Abed Zadeh as the second string keeper. But we'll come back and talk about starters a little bit more at the end. All right, moving on to defenders. We have a category for general or versatile defenders, but we don't have any players who seem to fit that. So we're going to start with central defenders. And we start with a definite candidate in Shozar Khalilzadeh. Shoja Khalilzadeh. A definite candidate, but he is a bit of an injury risk, which we'll come back to. Majid Hosseini actually is also an injury risk, I've discovered, and he is a likely candidate. And Hossein Kanani, and sometimes that name is given as Kanani Zadegan, but to make life simpler for myself, I'm going with the shorter version of his name, which is Hossein Kanani, also a likely candidate. And then we have 3 possible candidates in Aref Agassi and Aref Golami and Farshad Faraji. 3 possible candidates. 2 possible but unlikely in Amin Sorabian and Siavesh Yazdani. And then 2 veterans on the way out, or pretty much out of the picture now. Morteza Poraliganji. I'm going to say he's retired, although I have gotten a hint that he may be coming back into the picture. But definitely retired is Pejman Montazeri. All right, so we'll take a look at those players. So Shoja Khalilzadeh is an interesting case because he was off the team for 7.5 years and then returned in October 2021 to start 13 of their 16 games. So he kind of was off the team for all that time and then came back in as a starter. Was only selected, only not selected 1 time out of those 16 games. So he was unfortunately, though, injured for the last 2. So we're going to have to update on his injury situation. But the news seems good because when I prepared this, he was listed as injured. But just today, when I took a final look at it, he didn't seem to be on the injury list. So he may have recovered. He's been on the team since 2009 and has 23 caps and 1 goal, and is 33 years old, as you can guess, with him having been off the team for almost 8 years. He's one of the many players who have spent time in Qatar. He's there now playing for Al Ahly in Qatar and was with Al Rayyan in Qatar from 2020 to 22. And before that, he was with several big Iranian clubs, Persepolis, Sepahan, and Traktor Zazi. I think they're just called Traktor now. and before he moved to Qatar there. So actually, he had never made it on the squad for a tournament. So in the 2014 World Cup, no, he wasn't selected or on the preliminary squad. Another interesting note, and maybe this explains his long absence, for the 2015 Asian Cup, he was suspended from the national team due to conscription irregularities. That's the note I have. So a bit of an interesting case, and perhaps he was banned from playing by the government for a while and then just recently returned. Okay, so we're expecting to see him though, because on his return he's been playing regularly. Majid Hosseini, he started the last 3 of their 16 games since 2021, and he was on the bench for 8 games and was injured for a couple and out with coronavirus. A number of players actually on Iran were out for a few of those 16 games since 2021 with coronavirus. Okay, Majid Hosseini has been with the team since 2018 and has 17 caps and is 26 years old. And he plays for Kayserispor in Turkey and was with Trabzonspor in Turkey before that. He left to play in Turkey in 2018 and was with Esteghlal from 2014 to 2018. So he was part of the squad for the World Cup. He actually subbed into game 1 and then gained a starting position for the last 2 games, for games 2 and 3. And in the Asian Cup 2019, he was a starter, but he was subbed out of game 1 at halftime and was on the bench for game 2, but then he came back to start games 3 and 4. He was actually didn't do well in that cup. He gave away a penalty just 54 seconds into game 4 against Oman, and he committed fouls that actually should have gotten should have gotten red cards. They were worthy of either a red card directly or a second yellow card because he had gotten a yellow card in one of their games too. Anyway, so Majid Hosseini. However, I do have a note on him that he has a calf injury and is an unknown return date. So a bit of a worry there. And I should actually go back to tell you what Khalilzade's problem is. That was a hernia reported both for the March and the June game, so an ongoing problem. However, he doesn't seem to be listed as injured now, so seems to have recovered from that. Khalilzade. So it looks right now like Hosseini is more of a worry. So I'm going to move him. I'm going to move him from the down to the injured list there. Okay, moving on, we have Hossein Kanani. So Hossein Kanani started 14 of their 16 games since 2021, but wasn't selected for 2 of them. He's been on the team since 2015 and has 32 caps and 2 goals and is 28 years old. So he also plays for Al Ahly in Qatar since 2021, but has been with several clubs in Iran prior to that. Persepolis and Esteghlal from 2016 and 2017. Actually, he's had 2 spells with Persepolis, but he was loaned out to Beira-Mar in Portugal in 2013 and 14, so has a little bit of experience abroad. He was on the bench for the 2019 Asian Cup, so that was actually his first tournament. Yeah, he started with the team in 2015, but was basically absent for 2 years from the team. So it seemed to have struggled kind of inserting himself into the team. But He started 4 of their 6 games in the 2019 Asian Cup, so kind of worked his way into the team, and now we have him as a likely candidate. So that's Hossein Kanani. We'll move on to the possible candidates, and all of them are new to the team, actually, so they don't have any tournament experience. And actually, among the 3 of them, they only have 2 caps. So, however, they have been on the bench enough to make them a possible candidate. So the first one is Aref Agassi. So he got his first cap in March 2021 and didn't get any starts for their remaining 16 games, but he was subbed in for the last match, and he was on the bench for 5 matches besides. So 2022 is when he got his first and only cap, and he's 25 years old, and he plays for Fulad in Iran. Arif Golami also has 1 cap in 2022, and he is a bit younger at 23 years old, and he first appeared on the bench earlier than the previous player. He appeared in October 2020, and he was subbed in for his first game in 2022, and he was on the bench for the last 2 games. But muddying the water a bit, he was injured for 8, so it's possible that he could have been selected for those. But especially since he was on the bench for the last 2, might mean he's kind of making his way or making a bid for the World Cup squad. Finally, Farshad Faraji among the possible candidates. He doesn't have any caps for the national team, but he first appeared on the bench in March 2022 and was on the bench for 2 of their 3 games prior to June 2022, which is as far as my records go. I'll have to wait until there are a couple of games in September coming up in the next week or so, and but I'm not able to see who's been selected for those squads yet. Okay, so Farshad Faraji plays for Persepolis, and I don't think I mentioned that Aref Golami plays for Esteghlal, both of them playing for big teams in Iran. Finally, we have 2 candidates at the possible but unlikely, so I'll really just mention their names and a bit of information. Arman Sorabian last appeared for the team actually in 2018, but he was called up to a training camp recently, so an outside chance of making it. He's 27 years old and has no caps for the national team. Siavash Yazdani first appeared on the bench in September 2019, but he was subbed in for 1 game, 1 of their 16 games since 2021, and on the bench for 3. However, recently has not been called up, so we consider him possible but unlikely. He plays for Esteghlal in Iran. Now we look at a couple of players who are making their way off the team, and I've gotten a couple of hints that Morteza Poralaganji has appeared recently, but I can't remember what gave me that impression. But officially, he last appeared for the team in June 2021. So he's been off the team. He hasn't been called up for a year. Maybe he was called up to that training camp. Maybe that's what I'm recalling. But anyway, he was a starter. We'll get to that. And it seemed like he kind of retired or left the team. He was with the team since 2015 and had 44 caps and 3 goals, and is only 30 years old, so still in range of playing. And he plays for Persepolis in Iran now. He was with Shenzhen in China, and he also played in Qatar with Al Arabi in 2019 and 20, and has kind of alternated between China and Qatar, and also with Eupen in Belgium, which is a team that has ties to Qatar. So he He left Iran in 2015 to play abroad, but is now back in Iran. He was a starter from his first tournament in the 2015 Asian Cup. He actually scored an extra time goal in that cup, in that fabulous quarterfinal game with Iraq. So he was involved in that as a scorer. 2018 World Cup, he was also a starter and started all 4 games. All 3 games there, and in 2019. So a very important player for the team. But has been off the team, as I said, for the last year. So we'll see. It's still an outside chance of him making a comeback, because, as I said, I have gotten a hint of it. However, Pageman Montazeri is not likely to come back. He last appeared for the national team in November 2019, and is 39 years old, so probably aged out. He is still playing club soccer, and I won't go through those details. And I'll just say he was a starter in the 2014 World Cup. But in 2018 and 2019, he was just a substitute. So was kind of drifting off the team for quite a while there. Okay, so quite a few candidates there in central defence, and a bit complex because of a couple of injuries that make it a bit difficult to know. But we'll come back and try to predict the starters there. The situation, actually, I'll do a little summary of the central defenders, is Por Alaganji, Hosseini, and Kanani rotated in the Asian Cup, and that continued into the first round. But we saw that Por Alaganji dropped out, and Khalilzadeh kind of came in. So it was Kanani and Khalilzadeh for most of round 2. But then towards the end of round 2, a different player started coming in, defensive midfielder Nuraf Khan, and then Hosseini came in for the last 2 games there. So a bit of rotation there, not completely settled, and injuries to consider as well. Okay, let's move on to left backs. And a player coded as left back, but he doesn't actually play there that much, is Ehsan Hajisafi. So we consider him a likely candidate, and we'll come back to the reasons why. And we also have a likely candidate in Milad Mohammadi. And then we have 2 candidates who we consider possible but unlikely, Abul Fazl Jalali and Jafar Salmani, both possible but unlikely. So Ehsan Hajisafi started 6 of their 16 games since 2021. I was a bit surprised by that because I consider him a big name on the team, but only 6 of 16 games there. Subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 4, injured for 2 and not selected for 3 of them. So not as active as he has been in the past. He's been with Iran since 2008 and has 112 caps with the team and 7 goals. So a real veteran for the team, and 32 years old, so not too old, still has a tournament or 2 left in him. He plays for AEK Athens in Greece, and he has been abroad. He also played for Olympiacos in Greece, but has always kind of returned to Iran to play. So he's had 2 spells with Sepahan. That may be actually 3 spells with Sepahan. And was also with FSV Frankfurt in Germany. So has definitely been around. So his first tournament was the 2011 Asian Cup, where he was a starter, and he went on to start in the 2014 World Cup and the Asian Cup in 2015, 2018 World Cup, and 2019 Asian Cup. A starter in all of them. However, he was on the bench for games 3 and 4 in the 2019 Asian Cup. So perhaps slowing down a bit. And he has played in his designated position as a left defender, but really he plays all over the field. Kind of a hard player to pin down. Maybe I should have had him. Well, I would have called him a versatile defender, but he also plays in the midfield and sometimes as an attacking midfielder too. So kind of hard to put a label on the man. Okay, Milad Mohammadi really is a left back, and he started 5 of the 16 games since 2021 and was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 6. However, he was not selected for the last match, and he's been with Iran since 2015. So just like Haji Safi, and has other similarities with Haji Safi, I'll get to in a moment. He has 46 caps and 1 goal and is 29 years old. And like Haji Safi, he has played for AEK Athens in Greece since 2021. So they're club partners. He has traveled too. He was with Ghent in Belgium and Grozny in Russia. And he was with Ra-Ahan in Iran from 2014 to 2016 when he went abroad. So his first tournament was the 2018 World Cup, where he was subbed in. He actually tried a tricky somersault throw-in there. He looked quite nervous doing that. Looks like he had built up his nerve to try to do it, and he did pull it off, but anyway, 2019 Asian Cup, he was on the bench for games 1 and 2, but then gained a starting position for the following 4 games. There, so seems to be working his way into the team, because I think he was their designated left back for a period. We'll get to that soon. For a period after the Asian Cup, but then fell off again. We'll talk about it. Abul Fazl Jalali got his first cap in March 2021. And he hadn't started any of their games, but he was subbed in, for the first of the 16 games and on the bench for the last. So not called up often there. And Jafar Salmani got his first cap in March 2021 and actually got 2 starts over those 16 games since 2021 and was on the bench for 2. However, he wasn't selected for 12 matches, including the last 10. So we might have had him as a possible, but his recent participation hasn't been very involved. So that's it for left backs, but we got to talk about the position a bit, because you may have noticed that neither Haji Safi or Mohammadi accounts for all the games. And Haji Safi was the left back in game 2 of the Asian Cup, and then Mohammadi took over for games 3 to 6. And Mohammadi kind of held on to the position for most of the round 1 World Cup qualification games. But defensive midfielder Ezat Tolahi took over. And then in round 2, he only played once in the position, Mohammadi. And for the other 7 games, it was defensive midfielder Nuraf Khan and attacking midfielder Amiri. So I don't mean to overcomplicate things, but suffice it to say that he had the position of left back and then kind of lost the position and was replaced by kind of out of position players there. So that left back position doesn't seem to be nailed down very well at all. Different players playing in it. Okay, for right backs, we have one definite candidate, and that's Sadek Morahami. And this position is a bit more nailed down, he being the likely starter there. And we have a likely candidate in Saleh Hardani. Saleh Hardani, probably the backup there. But we also have a possible candidate in Daniel Esmailifar. We have a possible but unlikely Mehdi Shiri, and then a couple of players too who are seem to be retired or at least off the squad in Ramin Rezaian and Vuria Ghafouri. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning to Sadek Morahami. And he started 13 of their 16 games since 2021. He was injured for one and not selected for two others. So he seems kind of firmly in that position. And he is he's 26 years old, but has been with the team since 2018 and has 19 caps. So a bit of a latecomer to the squad. He's never participated in a tournament. He was selected for the preliminary squad for the 2019 Asian Cup, but despite playing 4 of their 6 games in the lead up to the Cup, was not selected. So he plays for Dynamo Zagreb in Croatia, and he's been loaned out to other teams in Croatia, and before that played for Persepolis in Iran. So, but he looks like a definite candidate here and the definite right back. Salah Hardani got his first cap in September 21, and he didn't start any of the remaining 11 games, but he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2. So he looks like a clear backup for this position, or perhaps, you know, he was subbed in for other positions. He hasn't really been on the field as a starter, so we don't know where he actually lands. So he has 2 caps since 2021 and is 24 years old, and he plays for Istiklal in Iran. And moving on, we have the possible candidate Daniel Esmailifar. Daniel Esmailifar got his first appearance on the bench in June 2021, and he didn't start any games. There were 15 games remaining till the end of what we've studied up to here, which is June 2022. But he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 4. So he just has that 1 cap in 2022, but has been on the bench quite a bit and is 28 years old. And he plays for Persepolis in Iran and was with Sepahan before that. Okay, Mehdi Shiri is possible but unlikely. He was also called up for that training camp and otherwise has never appeared for the team, even on the bench, despite being 31 years old. It seems like a very outside possibility, especially with a couple of players who seem likely to make the team ahead of him. Okay, a couple of players who seem to be off the team. Ramin Rezaian. And he last appeared for the national team in November 2019. He's still playing at the club level. He played with Iran from 2015 to 19 and got 44 caps in that time. He's 32 years old now. He's also a player who played for several clubs in Qatar, but right now he's back in Iran playing for Sepahan. And he was a starter in the 2018 World Cup and in the 2019 Asian Cup. So a bit of a loss to them. There, although he's not as big a name as some of the players who have moved on. Vuria Ghafouri last appeared for the national team in November 2019, and he was on the team from 2014 to 19 with 28 caps, but he's 35 years old now, even though he's playing club soccer still with Fulad in Iran. He was a starter in the 2015 Asian Cup, but didn't make the squad, actually didn't make the final cut for the World Cup 2018 squad. However, he was at the 2019 Asian Cup. So again, not one of the really big names, but two players at the right back, coded as right backs. But they seem to have replaced them quite well with Morahami and Hardani here. Okay, that is the end of defenders. So let's move on to the midfield. And again, we have a category for general or versatile midfielders. And actually, maybe I should put some of these in there because the midfield moves around quite a bit. But right now, we don't have any labeled that way. For defensive midfielder, we have Saeed Ezatolahi. Sorry, Iranian fans. Your names are a little tricky for me. Okay, Ezatolahi, and we consider him a definite candidate. And I've mentioned Omed Norafkan, who filled in at the left back position recently. We consider him a definite candidate. He's labelled as a defensive midfielder. And we have Milad Sarlak as a likely candidate. And we have Omed Ibrahimi as a possible candidate. Okay, let's go back to Saeed Ezatolahi. He played 12 of their 16 games since 2021 and was subbed in for 2 besides, so only 2 games that he wasn't called up for. And he's been with Iran since 2015, and it's 45 caps and 1 goal, and he's 26 years old. So right now he's playing for Vejle in Denmark. I'm just going to say he's playing in Denmark, but he is on loan to a team in Qatar. So yet another one of those on loan in Qatar. He was with Rostov in Russia from 2015 to 2020 and has been, has played in several countries, a few clubs in Russia. And it was loaned to Reading in England and was with Atletico Madrid, but just their C team in 2014 and 15. So he played for their youth club too, Atletico Madrid. In terms of tournaments, though, even though he was with the team since 2015, his first tournament was the 2018 World Cup. And he was actually suspended for game 1 for that, but resumed a starting position for games 2 and 3. However, he didn't make the 2019 Asian Cup due to injury. So that's Saeed Ezatolahi. And next we have Omed Norafkan, and perhaps he's mislabeled as a defensive midfielder because he pops up, as I said, as a left defender or even as a central defender. He had started 8, including the last 6 of their 16 games. So has worked his way into a starting position, it seems. And there were 4 games that he wasn't selected for. But as I say, the recent games he's been there. He's been with the squad since 2018 and has 13 caps, no goals, and is 25 years old. He plays for Sepahan in Iran, but did a spell with Charleroi in Belgium there. And he doesn't have any tournament experience. Neither actually made the preliminary squad for the 2018 World Cup, but not the final cut. And he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad in 2019. So in a sense, a bit of a new player, or has kind of worked himself into the team and into a starting position. Okay, we have Milad Sarlak as a likely candidate. He got his first cap in June 2021, and he only started 1 of their remaining 13 games from that time, but he was subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 2. So we consider him likely to make the squad, although probably not as a starter. So he's been with Iran since 2021 and has 8 caps and is 27 years old, and he plays for Persepolis in Iran, has been in Iran for his whole career. And finally, we have a possible candidate with Omid Ibrahimi. So he didn't start any of their 16 games since 2021. And he was subbed in for 2. But in fact, not called up for 14 matches. However, he has been a staple in the squad prior to this. So since 2012, he has 53 caps and 0 goals. But perhaps it's age, because he's 35 years old. So maybe he's aging out. He's currently playing for Al Wakra in Qatar, and was with Al Ali in Qatar before that. And prior to 2018, he was playing in Iran. He wasn't selected for the 2014 World Cup and was a sub in 2015 Asian Cup. He didn't see any action. However, he became a starter in the 2018 World Cup. Started all 3 games there and started all 6 games in the 2019 Asian Cup. So he worked his way into the squad. But yeah, he was 29 years old by the time he got a starting position. And so, now he's 35 years old. So maybe has lost that starting position. Actually, not used much since 2021. All right, so that is the situation with defensive midfielders, and I'm going to kind of summarize what's going on in that position after I talk about central midfielders, because they overlap quite a bit. So in the central midfield, we have Ahmad Nooralahi as a definite candidate. Let me try that again. Ahmed Nooralahi. And we have 2 possible candidates. Kamal Kamyabinya. That's a possible candidate. Kamal Kamyabinya. And Mehdi Medipur as a possible candidate. We have Yasin Salmani as a possible but unlikely candidate, and then a veteran who seems to be retired now, Ashkan Dejaga. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, and we have Ahmad Nooralahi. Even though he's coded as a central midfielder, he sometimes lines up as an attacking midfielder. As I said, they kind of rotate around there. He's played, as an attacking midfielder in one of their games. He has been he started 14 of their 16 games since 2021 and was subbed in for 1 and out with coronavirus for the other. So that's why we consider him a definite candidate. So Ahmad Nooralahi has been with Iran since 2018 and has 24 caps and 3 goals and is 29 years old. And he plays for Shabab Al Ali in the United Emirates. There, he went there in 2021 and was with Persepolis for 7 years before that. So the 2019 Asian Cup was his first tournament, but he only appeared in 1 game, so he was on the bench there. And that's it. But he seems to have gained a starting position since then, and actually scored 3 goals in qualifying, including a late winner in a comeback against Lebanon. So working his way into the team is Ahmed Nooralahi. The 2 possible candidates, the first one is Kamal Kamyabinya. So he returned after an almost 4-year absence in January 2022. He didn't start any of the remaining 5 games, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3 others. So he's actually been with the team since 2015, but has never really made it onto the team. He has 6 caps and 1 goal in that time, and he's 33 years old now. So he plays for Persepolis in Iran, but hasn't made a tournament for the team yet. So seems to have always been kind of on the outskirts of the national team there. Mehdi Medipour got his first cap in June 2022 and didn't start any games, but was subbed in for all 3 remaining matches. However, he's 28 years old and got his first cap this year. And as you can see, has 3 caps. He plays for Istiklal in Iran, but again, a player who, despite his age, has very little experience with the team. Okay, Yasan Salmani, we consider possible but unlikely. He doesn't have any caps for the national team yet, but he did appear on the bench in November 2021. But was not selected after that. But he's on the under-23 team, so he may be an up-and-comer. He's just 20 years old right now and plays for Sepahan in Iran, so a very outside chance of making it. And one player they're trying to replace here is Ashkan Dejaga. So he last appeared in October 2019. So after the Asian Cup, he continued to play, but not for that long. And he has 58 caps and 11 goals. He played from 2012 to 2019. But now he's 36 years old. So I would call it retirement. He's still playing at the club level for Fulad in Iran, and he played for Nottingham Forest in England and for Wolfsburg in Germany, and also for Fulham in England too. So kind of a lot of time between Germany and England, and actually sorry, I think Fulad in 2022 is the first Iranian club he actually played for, because he also spent some time in Iran. No, sorry, he did play for Traktor as well. Anyway, he was with the team since 2012 and so part of the World Cup 2014 squad and Asian Cup 2015. He was a starter in both of those, but was on the bench only for the 2018 World Cup, but then regained a starting position for the 2019 Asian Cup. So kind of losing a veteran in Ashkan Dejaga. All right, well, now that we've done the defensive and central midfielders, we'll take a look at what's going on in the middle of the park, in what has been going on. So again, players who are not necessarily positioned or labeled in these positions have been playing. Haji Safi, who's labeled as a right back, and Amiri, who's labeled as an attacking midfielder, have been kind of rotating in playing in the middle of the park. And usually it is a two defensive midfielder and 1 central midfielder, but we've seen the variety of formations at the beginning there. So in round 1, generally speaking, it was Nourahali in the center, and then in round 2 it was Nourahali and Eza Talahi as the kind of mainstays in the center of the pitch. But again, we've seen players kind of rotate in and out. All right, we move on to left midfielders, and here we have one of their biggest players with Mehdi Taremi, but again, again, kind of mislabeled a little bit because he plays everywhere, but nevertheless, he is usually on the pitch wherever he ends up playing. So he started 12 of their 16 games in 2021, and he was out with coronavirus for 1 and not selected for 3, possibly being rested rather than rather than not wanted. So rarely actually lines up in his designated position as a left midfielder, and is more often on the attacking end as a left winger or even a left forward sometimes. But he also has played in the central attacking midfield and has played as centre forward as well. So he's been with Iran since 2015 and has 58 caps and 27 goals. So he's one of their main scorers. And he's now 29 years old. No, 30 years old. So he plays for Porto in Portugal, and he has done so in 2020. And he's another player who played in Qatar with Al Gharafa in 2018 and 19, and was with Persepolis before that, and then some smaller Iranian teams. So kind of mostly came up through Iran, but left Iran in 2018 to play abroad. He was a sub in the 2018 World Cup, and but from game 2 he gained a starting position for both games, and then was a starter, of course. Actually, starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, but was not a starter for game 3 and was suspended for game 6. That was the 3-0 loss to Japan there that he wasn't on the field for. So he did score 3 goals in that cup. And since then he scored 7 of their goals in qualifying over seven different games. So he was kind of tied as a top scorer with Azmoun, who we'll be looking at a bit later. So he's the only one actually designated as a left midfielder. But as I say, they have a few players in that position. We're going to talk about Amiri soon, and he is often on the left side as well. But let's move over to the right side. No, I'll just kind of talk about that position a bit, actually. In the Asian Cup, it was Godos, who we'll talk about when we get to attacking midfielders. But their formation didn't really lend itself to a left midfielder in the Asian Cup. As I said, Taremi and Amiri tend to be out on the left side too. And in my mind, I kind of view Amiri as the left side, with Taremi as a more attacking midfielder, or even a forward ahead of Amiri on the left side. Jahan Bakash has played there a couple of times too. Recently, he's been switching over to the left side, but again, in a bit more of an attacking role. Okay, well, we're going to look at Jahan Bakash next. Ali Reza Jahan Bakash is coded as a right midfielder, so that's what we're moving on to. And we have him as a definite candidate. And we also have Mehdi Torabi as a likely candidate. So those are the two coded as right midfielders. So Ali Reza Jahan Bakash played 12 of their 16 games since 2021. And he's been with Iran since 2013 and has 62 caps and 13 goals. So not one of their major scorers, but chips in with goals quite a bit. He's now with Feyenoord in the Netherlands. He was with Brighton in England from 2018 to 21, but was with in the Netherlands before that. So with Alkmaar and Nijmegen. He moved from Iran in 2013 and has been playing in Europe ever since. He was called up for the 2014 World Cup, but he was a sub there, subbed into all 3 games actually. And in 2015 Asian Cup, he was also a sub, but he became a starter in the 2018 World Cup. Although it was just games 1 and 3 there, he subbed into game 2. And similarly, in the Asian Cup 2019, he was on the bench for the first 2 games, but then got a starting position for the remaining 4. So has kind of made it into the starting lineup. Even recently, since 2021, has only started 75% of their games, so not quite fully a starter. Nevertheless, we think he's a definite candidate for making the team. Whether he's a sub or a starter remains to be seen. Mehdi Tarabi didn't start any of their games, 16 games since 2021, but he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 9. So that makes us think he's a likely candidate for making the final World Cup squad. He's been with the team since 2015 and has 44 caps and 6 goals, and is 28 years old. So he plays for Persepolis in Iran, but that's his second spell with them. In between, he played in Qatar for a year with Al Arabi. Otherwise, he's played in Iran. And he was on the roster for the 2018 World Cup, but he didn't see any action there. He was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. He started game 1, but then he lost his starting position and appeared only as a substitute after that. So that seems to be his lot with the national team as a substitute, although he is a regular substitute. So just to summarize, we'll take a look at what's going on in the right back position. Jahan Bakash was had the role in the Asian Cup in 2019, but Amiri and Tarami also stepped into the position sometimes. Recently, though, Golizade, who's actually a right winger rather than a midfielder, has kind of taken over the position. And in round 2 of qualification, he kind of shared it with Jahan Bakash, but Jahan Bakash moved over more to the left side, and Golizade kind of became the regular on the right side. As I said, they don't often use that position. If you think of the 4-1 formation, it'll tend to be a winger rather than a midfielder. Okay, so we move on to wingers. And here we just have Mehdi Gaedi as a possible candidate. And we have Mohamed Mohebi as seemingly off the team. So not a lot to talk about there. But as we said, they do use a lot of wingers, so we'll see how they fill those positions, even though they don't have many designated as left wingers. So Mehdi Gaedi earned his first cap in October 2020, but he didn't start any of their 16 games since 2021. However, he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 4. So that might make him a likely candidate since he is being called up quite a bit. However, we moved him down to portable because he wasn't selected for the last 3 matches. Okay, that is Mehdi Gaedi, but he's quite young at 24 years old. He has 8 caps since 2020, so he may get into the team more in the future. Mohamed Mohebi last appeared for the team in November 2019. So he has 3 caps in 2019. But again, 24 years old, so he may be able to work his way back into the picture. But as far as designated left wingers, we don't have a lot of possibilities over there. However, for right wingers, we have a definite candidate in Ali Golizade. And we have Shurush Rafia as a possible but unlikely candidate. And then 2 players who seem to be off the squad, Murdad Mohadami and Mohammadi and Siamak Namati. seemed to be off the squad. So we'll talk about Ali Golazadeh, who he started 14 of their 16 games since 2021 and was subbed in for the other two. So always seems to be called up. However, he wasn't in the past. He started with the team in 2018, and since that time has 24 caps and 6 goals. He's 26 years old right now, but he had a bit of a tough time getting onto the team early on. He plays for Charleroi in Belgium and was with Saipa in Iran before that, from until 2018 when he moved to Belgium. But he didn't make the squad for the 2018 World Cup. He made the preliminary squad for both that and for the 2019 Asian Cup. But in both cases, he didn't make the final cut. However, he seems to have made it onto the team now because he's become a regular starter. And we have him as a definite candidate. Next is Shuru Rafi. And he actually returned after a more than 5-year absence in January 2022 and made 2 appearances on the bench. But then he wasn't selected for the last 3 games there. So he kind of came and went quickly. Not unlike his first stint with the national team in 2014 and 15, where he actually made the cup for the Asian Cup 2015, but then disappeared from the squad afterwards. He just subbed into game 1 in 2015 and then went to start and finish game 3, although that was a bit of a B team game. So, yeah, kind of made it onto the squad and even got some field time in the 2015 Asian Cup, but then disappeared for quite a while, really only coming back in January 2022 there. So he plays for Persepolis in Iran since 2022, and that's his 3rd stint with them. And he's played mostly for clubs in Iran. I won't go into detail there. Okay, Murad Mohammadi. He last appeared for the team in October 2019. He did play in Portugal, which may I'm not sure whether that really helps Iranian players get onto the national team. In some cases, in some national teams, playing abroad is kind of a good thing to have on the resume. But Iran has a pretty solid home system. So for countries like that, playing abroad doesn't really add much to the resume. Anyway, Murad Mohammadi has had 2 caps and 1 goal since 2019. Actually, all of those coming in 2019. And he's 29 years old, so we're not likely to see him. Siamak Nemati is younger at 20. Well, he's 28 years old. He last appeared on the bench in June 2021, and he plays for Persepolis in Iran and has 3 caps since 2020. But again, hasn't played recently. So that is the situation with right and left wingers, and we'll just kind of summarize what's going on in those positions. So Amiri, Godos, and Tarami all took a turn in the position during the Asian Cup, and right winger Golazadeh made some appearances there too. And in recent times on the left wing, Jahan Bakash was there for most of the second round of World Cup qualifying. But as I've said a couple of times, Amiri and Tarimi also show up on the left side. On the right side, it was Jahan Bakash in the Asian Cup, and that continued. But Tarimi, who roves the field, the offensive end of the field, showed up a couple of times there. And actually, veteran Shoje showed up there. That is Masoud Shoje showed up for one game. We'll talk about him when we get to attacking midfielders. Shoje got a red card in the one appearance he made there, and I think that was his last game for the national team. Anyway, in round two on the right wing, it's been all Golazade, so we expect to see him there in the cup. Okay, we forge on with the forward line. We include attacking midfielders as part of the forwards discussion. So for attacking midfielders, we have Vahid Amiri as a definite candidate, but also as an injury risk. He has what seems a fairly serious problem, a lumbar vertebrae fracture. So that's a fracture in his backbone. However, I've seen that he is due to return in October, so they'll really be hoping that he's available. But sorry, I shouldn't have started talking about him. I should introduce the other players first. So we'll come back to that. We have Saman Ghoddos as a likely category, as a likely player, and we have Amir Hossainzadeh as a possible candidate. And then seemingly retired now is veteran Masoud Shoje. So we'll come back to him. So I started talking about Vahid and his injury. Prior to the injury, he started 12 of their 16 games in 2021. But he was out for 4 matches with 2 separate injuries. But that back injury extended from March to June. And as I say, into current times, though he is expected back in October. So they'll be hoping he reaches the cup. He plays all over the field, and we've talked about him a bit, and we'll talk about him a bit more. He plays all over the field. He tends towards the left side, but he sometimes is central or even on the right side. And he's been with the squad since 2015 with 66 caps, despite being listed as an attacking midfielder or even as a secondary striker. He only has 2 goals for the squad, so seems to be more involved in setup play there. He's 34 years old, and he's returned to Iran to play for a second spell with Persepolis since 2019, and he was with Trabzonspor in Turkey in 2018 and 19, having left Persepolis to play for them. So he was part of the squad for the 2015 Asian Cup. But just started game 3 there, so mostly on the bench because game 3 was a B team game. But he was a starter in the 2018 World Cup, and also started in the 2019 Asian Cup, except he was suspended for 1 game. He got 3 yellow cards in that tournament, so was suspended for a game. So as I say, a definite candidate, but it comes down to his injury. Saman Ghoddos started 5 of their 16 games since 2021, and besides that, he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 3. However, he wasn't selected for 3 matches, including the last 2. And a bit of an interesting player. He was actually joined the Swedish team because he was born in Sweden. Joined the Swedish team for 1 game in 2017, but that same year committed to Iran, so that would have been a friendly for Sweden. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been allowed to switch. And since 2017, has 31 caps and 2 goals, and he's 29 years old. So Saman Ghoddos, his first tournament was the World Cup in 2018, where he was subbed in for all 3 games, and in 2019. He was a starter for games 2 and 3, but otherwise a substitute. He did appear in all 6 games, though 4 of them as a substitute. And Saman Ghoddos. So he plays for Brentford in England since 2020, and played for clubs in France and Sweden Before that, actually up to 2018, it was all clubs were in Sweden. So he's never played in Iran at the club level. A possible candidate is Amir Hosseinzadeh. So he got his first cap in March 2022 and didn't start any of their games. Just 3 games remaining after his start, but he was subbed in for all 3 matches. So that makes it 3 caps in 2022 for him. And he's 22 years old and plays for Charleroi in Belgium. That's a recent move in 2022. And he was with Esteghlal in Iran and Sepa in Iran before that. So a possible candidate in Amir Hosseinzadeh. I'm sure the announcers will be hoping for a shortened version of his name there. The last player we'll talk about here is Masoud Sojeh. So he's again, designated as an attacking midfielder, but kind of played in other positions too. He last appeared for the national team in November 2019. And as I say, he got a red card in the one game he played where he lined up as a right winger. And yeah, we won't go through a lot of his history. He's with a smaller club in Iran now since 2021. But he did in his past play for AEK Athens in Greece. I wonder if Iran has a bit of an agreement with them, because that's the 3rd player we've seen pop up play for them. And same with Al Gharafa in Qatar. They may have arrangements with some clubs in Qatar. He also did played for a couple of teams in Spain during his career. And he was important for them, actually a captain in the 2018 World Cup and 2019 Asian Cup, although he only appeared briefly in the Asian Cup in 2019, so seemed to be on his way out even then, but did play some games for them after that, all the way up till November 2019. But he's 38 years old now, so I doubt we'll see him on the squad here. Okay, so secondary strikers, actually they don't have anyone designated for that position, so we'll move on to forwards. And sorry, I'll just make a comment on attacking midfield as a position. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes these central midfielders or even defensive midfielders sometimes play in this position. And Torabi, who's usually a substitute, showed up here once, but mostly in this position when they play it is Turimi or Godos. And they didn't often use a kind of a direct attacking midfielder in round 2 of World Cup qualification. But again, when they did, it was usually Godos or the roving Haji Safi played the position once as well. All right, now we do move on to forwards, and we have a definite candidate in Sardar Azmoun, sometimes called the Iranian Messi, and Karim Ansarifard is a likely candidate. I almost want to move him up to definite, but we'll decide when we go through him. Kaveh Reze as a possible candidate, but he is an injury doubt, as well as Al-Aryar Syed Manesh. We have him as a possible, but also an injury doubt. Ali Alipur as a possible but unlikely candidate, and Shahab Zahedi also possible but unlikely. So let's go back to probably the biggest, or maybe along with Taremi, their biggest player, both physically and in terms of stature for the club. So Sardar Azmoun has been with the team since, no, let me just say why we have him as a definite first. So started 12 of their 16 games since 2021, and suspended for one game, which is not really a shocker, and not selected for two games out of those 16. So a staple for the team. He's been with the team since 2014 and has 63 caps and a stunning 40 goals. And he is 27 years old, so has several years of play left in him. He's probably the biggest club affiliation, Bayer Leverkusen in Germany. That's a recent move since 2022. Maybe he had to leave Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia because of the political situation in Russia now. And he was with Rubin Kazan in Russia and Rostov also. So has been there for a while, actually, even with Rubin Kazan's youth club. But he was with other youth clubs in Iran before that. So he's the son of a legendary volleyball player and is a huge guy. And his first tournament was the 2015 Asian Cup, where he subbed into game one and then gained a starting position for the remaining games. World Cup 2018, though, he was the starter. However, he didn't score any goals there. And in the 2019 Asian Cup, he started all 6 of their games, and there he did score 4 goals, 4 of their 12 goals there. One moment, please. All right. Okay, so in qualifying, he scored 10 of their 49 goals. They 24 of those goals came against Cambodia, their 2 games against Cambodia. He scored a hat-trick in one of those, and he was the top scorer for the team. So a very important player to them, and a definite candidate here. Also, almost definite is Karim Ansarifard, but actually he didn't start any of their 16 games since 2021. However, he subbed in for 10 and was on the bench for 4. However, despite not being a starter, he scored 7 of their 14 goals, and along with Taremi, was their co-top scorer, or second place, tied with Taremi behind Azmoun there. So he seems to firmly be a substitute, but comes on to the field to score goals at the end of the game. And he's been with the team since 2009, so probably their most veteran player. He has 91 caps and 27 goals, so very impressive considering he basically has been a substitute for most of his career. In the 2011 Asian Cup, he subbed into game 1 but gained a starting position for a few of the games. And also in 2014 World Cup, just a substitute, just started game 3 there. The 2015 Asian Cup didn't see any action at all, but was on the squad. But he was a starter in the 2018 World Cup. So I'm guessing they used 2 forwards in that system there. He actually was the scorer of their late equalizing goal against Portugal there. So there you can see that he tends to come in and score late, although he was a starter in that case. In 2019 Asian Cup, though, again, he was a substitute. So that seems to be his role. Nevertheless, very likely to be at the Cup. Kaveh Reze didn't start any of their 16 games, but was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 5. However, he was out for the last 3 with a fractured fibula. So, but he's not actually listed. No, sorry, I don't have that information on whether he, how likely he or when he's likely to return. So we'll maybe try to cover that in our update podcast. So Kaveh Reza has been with the team since 2015 and has 18 caps and 4 goals, and he's 30 years old. And he plays for Tractor in Iran. That's a recent move where he was in a couple of clubs with Belgium, from 2018. Or 2017, I should say, and has recently come back to Iran. Alayar Syed Nanesh has plays for Hull in England. Sorry, I'll tell you why we have him as possible but unlikely. He first appeared on the bench in June 2020, and out of the 16 games since 2021, he started 1 and subbed in for 5. So he too is out with a hamstring injury, but he is expected to be back in late September, so in time for the Cup there. And he's been with the Iran national team since 2019, but only has 7 caps and 1 goal in that time. But he has a lot of time because he's only 21 years old. He plays for Hull in England, and was with Fenerbahce in Turkey for 3 years before that. And he left Istiklal in Iran, who he played for in 2018 and 2019. So currently playing abroad, but a bit of an injury doubt. Ali Alipour is possible but unlikely. He returned after a 3-year absence, but just to the bench for their final game in 2022. So hard to say whether he's kind of back or not. We'll have to look if he appears in the upcoming games. But he's never played in a tournament despite being on the team since 2018, and has only earned 3 caps in that time, and is 28 years old. He actually plays for Gil Vicente in Portugal, a recent move there, but he's never played in a tournament. Shahab Zahedi, he doesn't have any caps for the national team, but he did appear on the bench in February 2022, but wasn't selected for any games after that. And he's 27 years old, and well, he was playing for Zorya Luhansk in Ukraine, but I suppose because of the political problems, he was loaned to Puskás Academia in Hungary from 2022. So possible there, but not likely to make the squad. So we'll talk a little bit about the forward position before we finish our player-by-player run through. So basically they always had one forward, as we saw in the formations in the Asian Cup, and that single forward was always Azmoun. But we saw they sometimes use a 2-man forward line, and in that case the other forward was Mehdi Taremi, and sometimes Jahan Bakash will line up as a forward, usually on the right side. And we have seen that a couple of times they used a 3-man forward line. So we could kind of view Jahan Bakash as the forward if they use a 3-man line. Actually, Mehdi Taremi played centre forward 3 times in the second round. Azmoun was out for a couple of games there. But actually, you know, he was centre forward one time when Azmoun was alongside him. But again, we can view Azmoun as the kind of usually the lone centre forward with either wingers or a co-forward from time to time. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the player-by-player discussion. So we move on to talk about the squad. And in fact, if we return to our kind of takeaways from the podcast we did during qualifying, these are mostly kind of at the team level rather than at the player level. But is Asia catching up? Well, Iranians are certainly hopeful, given how close they came in 2018, and given that Asian teams are passing more in recent times, and given that the Cup is in Asia. But again, a question remains. They're hoping that this tournament will be like 2002, a tournament where it takes place in Asia, so Asian teams do well. Iran, of course, one of the teams hoping to pass the group stage for the first time in their career. The other question we talked about is, do they have a regional advantage? And you saw how many players have played for teams in Qatar. And I imagine the climate is to their advantage compared to other countries. And we'll have to see if that pans out. The other kind of issue at the team level to think about is the new manager, their new old manager. So Carlos Queiroz was their manager in the 2019 Asian Cup. Gotta say, I don't see a lot of changes having been made among the managers, the two managers they had in between. And so I don't imagine he'll come in with sweeping changes, but rather, he may bring a couple of players back. He just started in September, so we have no evidence, no game evidence. It'll be interesting to see in September if he brings any players back or if he seems to favor certain players. But for now, it looks like that the changes aren't going to be sweeping. And tough to say if it'll make a big difference or not. Again, it'll be interesting to see those September games. Let's take a look at some of the players now, and we'll begin with club affiliations. So we saw probably their biggest club affiliation there was Ardar Azmoun, playing for Bayer Leverkusen. But we also saw that a few players are with AEK Athens in Greece, which is a pretty respectable club. And then as far as European clubs go, we have Mehdi Taremi with Porto, so that's also a bigger club affiliation. And a few players playing for smaller teams abroad, like Syed Manesh with Hull in England, Ansi Farad with Ammonia in Cyprus. I might have forgotten to give his club history, but he's with Ammonia. Saman Ghoddos with Brentford in England, and Jahan Bakas with Feyenoord in Netherlands. And defender Mahid Hosseini is with Kayserispor in Turkey. But most of the players seem to play for either Persepolis, Esteghlal, or some of them for Sepahan, which seem to be the three biggest clubs in Iran. And kind of like, maybe not to the extent of Mexico, but it is a healthy home league. So, players are not like anxious to get out of the home country and play for kind of European teams as much. And we also see they have a bit of an affiliation with clubs in Qatar, especially Al Ahly and Al Ghafara are probably the two clubs that we see the most. So I wondered at the beginning whether that was kind of a, kind of planning ahead to give them some experience in Qatar, or whether that just kind of is lucky and kind of works to their advantage. But I do think it will be an advantage. Okay, let's move on to some of the statistics that I've been putting together. And the first one is the total number of candidates that a team is looking at. So they have roughly 53 players who have been called up since 2020, which is basically the consideration for this category. 53 players. So it looks like that's about average. 52 is the average. And basically what I get from this statistic is how stable the squad is. Are they trying out a lot of new players? And the answer for Iran is no, they're not actually bringing in a lot of new players, kind of sticking with their veterans. But they're veterans. They do have a few on the way out there, so that number is actually I don't know. I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, it's not really a significant statistic. The number of candidates who are definite or likely is 22. That's actually average also, so the average is 21. But it does seem, again, a stable squad, not in terms of the same players starting all the time. What Iran tends to have is more like, let's say there's two central midfield position, and they'll have three or perhaps four players rotating in and out of that position. So it's a fairly stable squad in one sense, but not so stable in the sense that players are playing in the same position all the time. That's not the case with Iran. There are a couple of positions where it is a kind of a stable player, the same player playing the positions, but otherwise it's there's a lot of movement, but among a limited number of players. The candidates who are definite, likely, or possible are 34, so that's slightly higher than the average of 32. So again, not really a meaningful statistics here. It's when teams have a very high number or a very low number, it's more telling. However, for Iran, a bit more significant is the average age, 27.7. So that's quite high. In fact, one of the highest of the 12 teams that I've done these stats for. The average is 26.4 and generally between 25 and 27. So they have a lot of players who are quite senior here. Average number of caps is also above average, which makes sense if they're a bit older. That's also 27.7, and the average is 26.3 for that. So we can see them as kind of a mature squad there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Hang on, I'll mention it now. For average age, we have Omid Ibrahimi is 35, but he hasn't been playing with the team much. We have about 8 players who are above, 9 players who are 30 or above. So that's why the average age is quite high. And at the other end of the scale, we have 2 players who are 21 years old, and these are among the definite, likely, or possible players. And then the next youngest is 23 years old. There's just one 23-year-old and 24 and up. So not a lot of young players and quite a few older players. So I don't think that'll be a problem for this cup, but it does look like they'll have to do some refreshing after this cup. And actually the Asian Cup follows quickly on the heels of this. They have moved it to the summer of 2023. It's usually in January, but they don't want it right after the World Cup. But I wonder if Iran will do some refreshing after that. In terms of caps, by far the player with the most caps is Haji Safi. He has 119 caps. And then Ansarifat has 92, and the third highest player is Vahid Amiri with 66. And in this case, we do have quite a few players who have 10 caps or less among the players that we listed. So that would be about 12 players with 10 caps or less. So given what we saw with age, it seems like Iranian players kind of joined the national team quite late. And we did see that in some of the player-by-player analysis. Moving on to goals, I'm not sure how to interpret this statistic, so I'm kind of looking out for a better way to do it. But the total number of goals among the players, The total number of players among the ones we've listed is 148. So again, it kind of stands to reason that that's higher than average, quite a bit higher than average. The average is 108, but because they have a lot of older players, um, that's not really a surprise. However, it is still a lot of goals, so we can see them as a scoring team. I guess 24 goals against Cambodia over 2 games maybe skews that figure a bit, but they are kind of a stronger team in their region and score a lot of goals. It works out to 4.4 per player, and the average among the teams I've done is 3.5. So it kind of suggests that they're a scoring team. Okay, let's move on to players and issues to watch. So in defense, we have a bit of a question as to whether Beiran Van or Abed Zadeh is going to be the starting keeper. Abed Zadeh did take over for 4 or 5 games there in the second round of World Cup qualifying, and Beiran Van wasn't injured for those, but whatever their reason was, it could have been to give Abed Zadeh some experience, or it could be that they're thinking of him for a starter. But the fact that there's a new coach, a new manager in place may influence that decision. Personally, I think they're going to start with Beiran Van as the starting keeper, but there is a bit of an argument for Abed Zadeh. Also in defence, as the interesting story of Khalid Zadeh, who came back to the team after long absence, but then was listed as injured. However, my most recent information suggests he's recovered from that injury. But because he started most games in central defence, it's kind of an important issue whether he is fit or not. So, as in 2006, they seem to be struggling with a few injuries coming into the Cup, and Iranian fans will hope that it's not a repeat of 2006. The other issue in defence is the left defender. Mohammadi nailed it down for a while, but then kind of seemed to lose it, so lose the position. So other players came in from different positions to fill in, so a bit unsecure. It kind of seems like a position that's up for grabs, as opposed to the right defense position, which is really held down by the one player. Okay, in the midfield, I guess one of my questions is the kind of rotation that Iran does better than having kind of a starting 11? It's almost as if they have kind of a starting 15 or 16, which is kind of the way things are going with teams playing so many games. So it could mean that, players are less prone to injury or are fresher because they're not playing all the time. But it also could mean that it interrupts the teamwork of the team if you have different players on the field all the time. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes and whether it changes under Carlos Queiroz. But it was the same way with Queiroz during the 2018 Cup. So the truth is that I think I'd have to be more intimate with the team to be able to make a judgment on whether it's for the better or whether they should settle on a more predicting starting lineup. Okay, in attack, the goal scorers, this is more players to look out for as goal scorers. So Azmoun and Taremi score most of their goals, so look for those players to be getting the goals. Ansi Farad seems to come in late as a substitute and scores plenty of goals. So a bit of an interesting position he plays. And Jahan Bakesh also chips in with some goals. However, Iran does get goals from players all over the field. And I think I forgot to do the analysis on goal scorers, so I'll just tell you what I've got. Asmoon is an amazing 63% in his goals. He has 40 goals in 63 games. So that is a very high scoring percentage. And so Taremi is 46%, so almost a goal every 2 games, very high. And Ansari Ford, despite being a substitute most of the time, still scores a goal, 1 goal every 3 games. So he has 29 goals in his 92 caps and has a 31% average there. And they have a couple of players who are over 25%. So some of those forwards we talked about, actually Goalie Zade is a right winger now. He's 25%. And Kave Reze and Jahan Bakash are both above 22%. So they're looking good for goals and could get them all over the field. Okay, let's look at some of the new players. And none of them have really made it into a starting position on the field. So most of these are at the possible and a couple at the likely level, who I'll point out. But Araf Agassi is a central defender, and we're going to see they're going to need to bring 1 or 2 of these players. Araf Agassi and Aref Golami and Farshad Faraji, all central defenders who are new to the squad. We gave a full bio in the player-by-player thing, but these guys don't have a lot of caps for the team, but they've been on the bench. A new player who we consider likely is Salah Hardani, and he's 24 years old. So as I said, a lot of players joining Iran kind of join them at a bit of an older age. And actually the next one, the possible candidate, Daniel Esmailifar, is 29 years old, but he got his first cap in 2022. So we would consider him a new player. He's been on the bench enough to be considered a possible candidate. Defensive midfielder Milad Sarlak is the one of 2 players on this list who we consider a likely candidate. But again, he hasn't started much, but he's been on the bench or subbed in quite a bit. And then Amir Hossein Zadeh is an attacking midfielder just coming into the team. He truly is young at 22 years old, so kind of working his way into the squad, as is Alayar Sayed Manesh, who has played for Fenerbahce in Turkey and recently moved to Hull in England. He's just 21 years old. So a few new players to choose from there, but a bit of an injury risk for him. Hamstring injury, but he's expected back in late September. And we have a few players who are injury risk, to the dread of Iranian fans. Shoja Khalilzadeh, he would be a definite candidate, except he's been injured for the last 2. And sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head what his situation was. Yeah, as I said, they don't have him listed as injured anymore, but I believe it was just trying to remember what the injury was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Vahid Amiri is a real worry for them because he's a very important player on the left side. He has a fractured back, but he is expected to return in October. So they will definitely hope that he will. Then 2 possible forwards, one of whom we mentioned above, Kave Reze. a young player, but considered a possible candidate with a fractured fibula. So tough to say whether he'll recover from that injury in time. However, Alayar Syed Manesh is expected back in late September. So also a possible forward for them. Okay, let's move on to notable absences. So I said during the full podcast that I kind of have the feeling or have some indication that Morteza Pouralaganji might be making it back onto the squad. Perhaps he's favoured by the new manager or by the old new manager. And but he did last appear in June 2021. However, Pejma Montazeri, the other central defender, does seem to be retired, last appearing in 2019. So all of these guys having had lots of caps for the team. Ramin Rezayan, right defender, last played in November 2019. He had 44 caps. And central midfielder Ashkan Dejaga last played for the team in October 2019, and he had 58 caps. And finally, Masoud Soje last played in 2019, and he's 38 years old, so unlikely to come back, but he was their captain and had 87 caps. So actually all of these players are still playing at the club level. So with the new manager, there is an outside chance that they would be called back. Let's finish up with the predicted starters then. So we'll just kind of copy our list of players in and then go through them, and we'll mark the starters for those watching on YouTube in a green highlight and the substitutes in a blue highlight. So we begin with the manager, Carlos Queiroz. He came back having coached the team in 2019 Asian Cup. Two managers coming in to replace him after that, but then him being called back for this cup. So we would say he's definitely in there now. Among the goalkeepers, a bit of a question with Ali Reza Berenvand and Amir Abedzadeh. We would say I think Ali Reza Berenvand is the most likely to be the starter, but I think there is a shout for Amir Abedzadeh, who did start a few of those round 2 World Cup qualification games. And then the third keeper, maybe a couple of candidates there for that. You can look at the extended podcast or the full-length podcast for discussion about that. Among defenders, Shoja Khalilzadeh, we consider a starter. And I found out that his problem was a hernia, which lasted from March to June. So kind of a long-term problem there, but he's not listed as injured now. So seems to have recovered from it. Hosseini Majid, on the other hand, remains injured with a calf problem, and there has an unknown injury return date there. So even if he comes back, though, I would probably see him more as a substitute, and Hossein Kanani as the starter alongside Khalilzadeh. But again, the new manager might have favourites and come in there. But Hosseini would definitely be the first backup, and we have 3 possible candidates. And usually teams bring around 5 central defenders, so a couple of those possible candidates are likely to make the squad. Like we saw that they had 34 players on the definite, likely, or possible, so they're going to have to cut that down to 26. But you need more than 3 central defenders among them. Ehsan Hajisaf, he's a real veteran for the team. He's listed as a left back, but he plays all over the field. But recently hasn't been playing that much. So I'm going to put him as a substitute here. We think he's likely to make the team, but he may not be a starter anymore. Okay, and Milad Mohammadi, same. He did kind of hold down the left back position for a while, but then it kind of went up for grabs again. So a few different players have been playing in that position. So we can't say that he's going to be a starter. He only started 5 of their 16 games since 2021. So I'm going to put him as a substitute, likely to make the squad, but as a substitute. On the right side, though, it is definitely Sadegh Moharami, who seems both a definite candidate and a starter. However, he has a fairly regular backup in Salah Hardani, so we're going to put Hardani as a substitute there, a pretty solid substitute, likely to make the team. In the midfield, moving on to the midfield, we think Eza Tolahi is a definite candidate and also a starter in the midfield, and Omid Nuraf Khan, same thing. Those guys are both listed as defensive midfielders, as is Milad Sarlak. But Milad Sarlak, we think, likely to make the cut, but he would be a substitute. But actually, the main central midfielder recently seems to be Ahmed Nuruhali. So we have three starters kind of in the central and defensive midfielder. But as we've said, they do kind of move around a lot or rotate. So we think they'll basically be starters, all three of them. Though listed as a left midfielder, Mehdi Taremi kind of roves over the field more in the forward position, but wherever he is, we think he'll be a starter. And on the right midfield, Ali Reza Jahan Bakash will be a starter. He's been starting on the left actually recently, and so he may actually appear on the left side there, because they don't really have a left winger, a player coded as a left winger who starts a lot. We also think right midfielder Mehdi Torabi is likely to make the cut, but probably as a substitute. Ali Golizada is a right winger, and he seems to be the right winger now. He doesn't have any tournament experience, which is what the grey means if you're looking at the YouTube version of this. Hasn't appeared in a tournament, but he has been in that position regularly and increasingly through World Cup qualifying. So among the forwards, we start with attacking midfielders, and Vahid Amiri is kind of all over the field, actually sometimes playing as a left back or a left midfielder, and sometimes even on the right side. Well, he is a kind of an injury concern, but if he's fit, we think he'll be a definite and a starter. But if he is not fit, they'll have a bit of a struggle. So, yeah, so Vahid Amiri, I was trying to look up a bit of information on him, but I'm not able to. Okay, Saman Godos, kind of halfway between a starter and a substitute. So he might get on as a starter, but I'm not really confident about it. So I kind of went down the middle and said he's going to be a likely candidate. He's a likely candidate, but kind of not dead sure whether he'll be a starter or not. Okay, and then among the forwards, Sardar Azmoun no doubt will be a starter. It would be kind of a shock if he wasn't, although he didn't start every qualifying game. And Kareem Ansari Ford, I'd almost say a definite candidate to make the team, but he's a substitute. He always kind of comes on as a substitute throughout his career for the most part, and scores a lot of goals nonetheless. But I think we'll see him coming in, maybe for the last 20 or 30 minutes of games and continue on in that role. So there we have what we think will be the starting lineup. So we'll see if there's any major changes in under the new manager in their September game. So that brings us to the end of the podcast, or the mediacast, I should say. And thanks so much for listening. And keep in mind, we'll be doing that update in early to mid-November, once the once the final rosters are published. Meanwhile, keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And our website, soccerphiles.captivate.fm. It's on the YouTube video. And check our show notes, because I've been improving those recently. So there are lots of links to our websites and previous podcasts, and just good information. All right. See you next time. Bye-bye.